Jameer, a 19-year-old shoeshiner, desperate for the $12 he still needed for his siblings' medicine, quietly packed his kit in helpless defeat and trudged toward the station in the freezing wind. Suddenly, a heavy thud from the side gate stopped him in his tracks. Before him lay a well-dressed man motionless in the rain blood pooling on the pavement. Without a second thought, he rushed to help supporting the stranger back to his damp, cramped room to bandage his wounds and offer him his very last bowl of noodles, never suspecting that he had just saved an amnesiac billionaire being hunted and unwittingly trapped himself in an inescapable chase. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain hit Newcrest like it had something personal against the city. Jameer Carter stood under the flickering fluorescent light of Union Station's east exit, wiping down his shoeshine box with a rag that had seen better days. His fingers were stiff from the cold, and his stomach had been growling for the past 2 hours, but he couldn't leave yet. Not when he was still $12 short. $12 more, he muttered to himself, watching the last few commuters rush past him without a glance. Just 12. He needed 38 total, 26 for Malik's inhaler refill, and 12 for the overdue electric bill that the landlord had threatened to cut if he didn't pay by tomorrow morning. The math was simple. The solution wasn't. At 19, Jameer had gotten used to this kind of arithmetic, the kind where every number mattered because there was no margin for error, no safety net, no backup plan. Just him and his 9-year-old brother in a 4th-floor walk-up that smelled like mold and broken promises. "Hey, shoe guy." Jameer looked up. A middle-aged man in a wrinkled suit was pointing at his boots. "You still open?" "Yeah," Jameer said, straightening up too fast. His back protested, but he ignored it. "Yeah, absolutely. Have a seat." The man dropped into the elevated chair with a grunt, and Jameer got to work. Polish brush buff. The rhythm was automatic now. Muscle memory from 2 years of doing this 6 days a week. His hands moved while his mind stayed locked on the numbers. 26, 12, 38. "Rough night to be working outside," the man said, glancing at the rain hammering the pavement just beyond the station's overhang. "Every night's rough if you need the money," Jameer replied without looking up. The man chuckled, but it wasn't a mean sound. Just tired. Ain't that the truth? When Jameer finished, the man handed him a 10. No tip. Jameer swallowed his disappointment and nodded his thanks. $36. Still too short. The man walked off and Jameer checked his phone. 11:47 p.m. The station would close in 13 minutes and security would kick him out, whether he had his $38 or not. He scanned the empty halls. No one left. Just the hum of the vending machines and the distant echo of a janitor's cart. "Damn it," he whispered. He started packing up his kit fingers, fumbling with the clasps. Tomorrow he'd have to choose, inhaler or electricity, Malik's breathing or another night of cold showers and sitting in the dark. Some choice. He slung the box over his shoulder and headed for the exit, pulling his hood up against the rain. The moment he stepped outside, the wind slammed into him like a fist, and the downpour soaked through his jacket in seconds. He hunched forward, keeping his head down, and started the 15-minute walk home. But then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A heavy thud followed by a wet scrape like something dragging across concrete. Jameer stopped, water streaming down his face. He turned toward the sound and saw a figure sprawled on the ground near the station's north entrance, just outside the circle of light from the street lamp. The man wasn't moving. Jameer's first instinct was to keep walking. This city had taught him that lesson early. Don't get involved. Don't make yourself a target. Don't be stupid. But his feet didn't move. "Yo!" he called out, his voice barely audible over the rain. "You good?" No answer. Jameer hesitated, looking around. The street was empty. No cars, no witnesses. Just him and the rain and this stranger on the ground. He took a step closer, then another. The man was older, maybe late 40s, dressed in a soaked gray suit that looked expensive even in the dark. His salt and pepper hair was plastered to his skull, and there was blood running from a gash above his right eyebrow, mixing with the rain and pooling on the pavement. "Sir," Jameer crouched down close enough now to see the shallow rise and fall of the man's chest. "Can you hear me?" The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glassy. He tried to lift his head, then groaned and let it drop back down. "Take it easy," Jameer said, glancing up at the station entrance. He should call 911. That was the smart move, but his phone was down to 6% battery, and he didn't know if the guy had insurance or ID or anything. The man's lips moved barely a whisper. Where am I? Union Station, Jameer said. New crest. You fell, man. Hit your head pretty hard. The man blinked, rain streaming into his eyes. I don't remember. What's your name? The man stared at him, his brow furrowing like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. I don't know. Jameer's stomach dropped. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. The man's voice cracked, panic flooding in. He tried to sit up, hands scrabbling at the wet pavement. I don't know my name. I don't know where I live. I don't— Whoa, hey! Jameer grabbed his shoulders, steadying him. It's okay. You're okay. Just breathe. The man was shaking now, full-body tremors that had nothing to do with the cold. His breathing was fast and shallow, and his eyes darted around like he was looking for something familiar and finding nothing. Do you have a wallet? Jameer asked. Phone, anything. The man patted his pockets, movements jerky and uncoordinated. No, nothing. There's nothing. Jameer sat back on his heels, rain pouring down his neck. This was bad. Real bad. The guy was clearly hurt, probably concussed, maybe worse. He needed a hospital. But if Jameer called an ambulance, they'd take him and rack up thousands in bills. And if the guy really didn't remember who he was, he'd wake up buried in debt with no way to pay it. Jameer knew what that felt like. Okay, he said, more to himself than the man. Okay, we're gonna figure this out. I don't understand what's happening. The man's voice was so small now, like a kid lost in a crowd. Why can't I remember? Jameer didn't have an answer. He looked around again, hoping someone else would show up and make this decision for him. But the street stayed empty, and the rain kept falling, and the man kept shaking. Can you stand? Jameer finally asked. I think so. Jameer helped him to his feet, and the man swayed, gripping Jameer's arm like a lifeline. He was taller than Jameer, broader in the shoulders, but right now he felt fragile, breakable. Where are we going? The man asked. Jameer didn't answer right away. He thought about the $12 he still needed. He thought about Malik asleep in their apartment, wheezing through damaged lungs. He thought about every lesson this city had beaten into him about keeping his head down and minding his own business. Then he thought about the look in the man's eyes, that raw, terrified confusion. My place, Jameer said quietly. It's not much, but it's dry. The man nodded, still clinging to him. Thank you. Jameer didn't respond. He just shifted his grip, taking more of the man's weight, and started walking. The apartment was worse than Jameer remembered. He saw it through the stranger's eyes as they climbed the 4 flights of stairs, the man leaning heavily on the railing, peeling paint, flickering hallway lights, the smell of something rotting in the walls. By the time they reached the door, Jameer's face was burning with shame he hadn't felt in months. Sorry, he muttered, fumbling with his keys. It's not exactly the Ritz. The man didn't say anything. Maybe he didn't know what the Ritz was. Maybe he'd forgotten that too. Inside the apartment was a single room, divided by a curtain Jameer had hung from the ceiling. On one side, a twin mattress on the floor where Malik slept. On the other, a futon that doubled as Jameer's bed and couch. A hot plate, a mini fridge, and a card table with 2 mismatched chairs. The bathroom was a closet with a toilet and a showerhead that barely worked. Malik was asleep, curled up under a blanket that was too thin for the weather. His breathing was rough, that wet rattle that always made Jameer's chest tighten. Sit, Jameer whispered, pointing to the futon. The man sat staring at the floor. Water dripped from his suit, pooling around his shoes. Jameer grabbed the only clean towel he had and handed it over. Dry off. I'm going to see what I can do about that cut. He dug through the cabinet under the sink, pulling out a half-empty bottle of rubbing alcohol, a box of Band-Aids, and some gauze he'd shoplifted from a CVS 3 months ago. When he turned back, the man was still sitting there, towel in his lap, staring at nothing. Hey, Jameer said softly. You with me? The man blinked like he was coming back from somewhere far away. Yeah, sorry. Jameer knelt in front of him, dabbing at the cut with a wet cloth. The man flinched but didn't pull away. This is gonna sting, Jameer warned, unscrewing the alcohol. It's fine. It wasn't fine. The man hissed through his teeth when the alcohol hit his hands, gripping the edge of the futon so hard his knuckles went white. But he didn't make a sound, didn't complain. Jameer worked quickly, cleaning the wound and pressing a piece of gauze over it. You should probably get stitches. I don't have money for that. You don't know if you have money for that? The man let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Fair point. Jameer sat back, studying him. In the dim light of the apartment, he looked less like a stranger and more like someone's dad. tired lines around his eyes, a wedding ring tan on his left hand even though there was no ring. "You married?" Jameer asked. The man looked down at his hand, rubbing the pale strip of skin with his thumb. I don't know. Maybe. I think so." "Kids." The man's face went very still. Something flickered in his eyes there and gone so fast Jameer almost missed it. "I don't know," he said again, but his voice cracked on the last word. Jameer didn't push. He got up and went to the hot plate, scraping together the last of his instant ramen and some bouillon cubes. It wasn't much, but it was hot, and that counted for something. When the water boiled, he poured it into 2 chipped bowls and handed one to the man. "Eat." The man took it, hands shaking. He didn't say thank you. He just stared at the bowl like he didn't know what to do with it. "It's not poisoned," Jameer said, sitting down across from him. "Promise." The man's lips twitched, almost a smile. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. Then another. And another. They ate in silence, the only sound Malik's labored breathing and the rain hammering the window. When they finished, the man set his bowl down and looked at Jameer. Really looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" Jameer shrugged. "You needed help. That's it. That's it." The man shook his head slowly. "Most people would have just kept walking." "Yeah," Jameer said quietly. "They would have." The man studied him for a long moment, then leaned back against the futon, exhaustion settling over him like a weight. His eyes drifted shut, and within seconds his breathing evened out. Jameer stayed where he was, watching him sleep. He thought about the $38 he didn't have. He thought about the $12 worth of food and supplies he'd just used on this stranger. He thought about Malik's inhaler sitting empty on the card table. Then he looked at the man's face, slack with exhaustion, and thought about the fear in his eyes when he couldn't remember his own name. "Damn it," Jameer whispered to the empty room. He pulled the blanket off his futon and draped it over the man, then grabbed his jacket and curled up in the chair. It was going to be a long night, but at least the guy wasn't alone. Sometime around 3 a.m., the man started dreaming. Jameer woke to the sound of his voice, low and broken, murmuring words that didn't quite make sense. "Emma. No, please. Emma." Jameer sat up, rubbing his eyes. The man was still asleep, but his face was twisted in pain, and his hands were clenched into fists. "Dad," the man whispered, and his voice cracked like something breaking. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Jameer didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched as the man's breathing hitched as tears slipped down his face, even in sleep. Whoever this guy was, whatever he'd forgotten, it wasn't all gone. Some pain went too deep to forget. Jameer pulled his knees to his chest and waited for morning, wondering what the hell he'd just brought into his life. Morning came with the sound of sirens and Malik coughing. Jameer jolted awake, his neck screaming from sleeping in the chair. The apartment was gray with early light, and for a second he forgot about the stranger on his futon. Then the man shifted, groaning, and reality crashed back. "Jameer," Malik's voice was small, muffled by the curtain. "You home?" "Yeah, little man. I'm here." Jameer stood, every muscle protesting, and pulled the curtain back. Malik was sitting up, his inhaler clutched in one hand, shaking it. Empty. The sound rattled through Jameer's chest, worse than his brother's breathing. "It's out," Malik said, eyes wide. "I tried, but nothing's coming." I know, buddy." Jameer knelt beside the mattress, putting a hand on Malik's narrow shoulder. "I'm gonna get you more today, okay? I promise." Malik nodded, but the trust in his eyes made Jameer want to punch something. The kid believed him, always did, even when Jameer didn't deserve it. Behind him, the man on the futon stirred, sitting up slowly. His hair was sticking up in weird angles, and the bandage on his forehead was spotted with dried blood. He looked around the apartment like he was seeing it for the first time, which, in a way, he was. "Who's that?" Malik asked, peering around Jameer. "A friend," Jameer said before he could think better of it. "He needed somewhere to stay last night." The man met Jameer's eyes, something unreadable passing across his face. Then he turned to Malik and managed a small smile. "Good morning." Malik stared at him, then looked at Jameer. "He talks fancy." "Yeah, well." Jameer stood ruffling Malik's hair. "Not everybody sounds like us. You hungry?" "Always." Jameer checked the mini-fridge. 1 egg. Half a carton of milk that smelled okay. Some bread that was only a little stale. He could make that work. While he cooked, the man stood and walked to the window, moving carefully, like everything hurt. He stared out at the street below, watching the morning traffic build. Jameer noticed his hands were shaking again. "You remember anything?" Jameer asked, cracking the egg into a pan. The man was quiet for a long moment. Pieces. Nothing useful. Like what? A boardroom. People arguing. Someone wearing a ring with a dragon on it. He touched his forehead, wincing. And then falling. But I don't know if that's a memory or just my brain making things up. Jameer divided the egg between two plates, giving Malik the bigger half, and handed the smaller portion to the man. Eat first, think later. They sat at the card table, the three of them crowded around it. Malik attacked his food like he hadn't eaten in days, which wasn't far from the truth. The man ate slowly, mechanically, like he'd forgotten what hunger felt like. "What's your name?" Malik asked through a mouthful of eggs. "Malik, don't talk with your mouth full," Jameer said automatically. The man set down his fork. "I don't know my name." Malik's eyes went wide. "For real? For real? That's crazy." Malik leaned forward, fascinated. "Like you don't remember anything, not even your favorite color." The man actually smiled at that. Blue. I think maybe blue." "Mine's red," Malik announced. "Like Spider-Man." "That's a good choice." They finished eating, and Jameer sent Malik to brush his teeth while he cleared the plates. The man helped without being asked, carrying dishes to the sink. "You don't have to do that," Jameer said. "I know." The man ran water over a plate. "But you fed me, gave me a place to sleep. It's the least I can do." Jameer didn't argue. He turned on his phone, which had died overnight, and waited for it to boot up. When it did, 17 notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls from work, a text from his landlord about the electric bill, and something else that made his blood run cold. A news alert. Breaking billionaire Elias Montgomery missing for 24 hours. Jameer's hands went numb. He clicked the notification and a photo loaded. A professional headshot of a man in an expensive suit, silver hair, perfectly styled, confident smile. The same man standing at his sink, washing dishes. "Oh no," Jameer whispered. "Oh no, no, no." The man looked over. "What's wrong?" Jameer turned the phone around, showing him the screen. The man stared at the photo, his face going pale. That's me." "Yeah." Jameer's voice came out strangled. "That's you. Elias Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Holdings, worth somewhere around $2 billion. The man, Elias, took the phone with shaking hands, reading the article. His lips moved silently as he scanned the text. Elias Montgomery, 48 chairman and CEO of Montgomery Holdings, was last seen leaving a board meeting at company headquarters Monday evening. Security footage shows him exiting the building at 9:47 p.m. His car was found abandoned 3 blocks from Union Station with the driver's side door open. Police are treating this as a potential abduction. Anyone with information is urged to contact. Elias sat down heavily in the chair. "I'm a billionaire." "Apparently. And people think I was kidnapped." "Yep." Elias looked up at Jameer, and the fear in his eyes was different now. Sharper. "If they find out I'm here with you, they're going to think you took me." Jameer's stomach dropped because he'd already thought the same thing. A poor black kid from the South Side with a missing billionaire in his apartment. The cops wouldn't ask questions. They'd just assume. "I should go," Elias said, standing up. "Right now, before this gets worse for you." "And go where?" Jameer shot back. "You don't remember where you live. You don't have a phone, a wallet, nothing. The second you walk out that door, someone's gonna recognize you and call the cops. And then what? You can explain that you've been hiding in some kid's apartment all night." Elias opened his mouth, then closed it, because Jameer was right, and they both knew it. "So what do we do?" Elias asked quietly. Jameer ran a hand over his face. "I don't know, man. I really don't know." Malik appeared from behind the curtain, backpack slung over his shoulder. "I'm ready for school." "Good." Jameer grabbed his jacket. "Let's go." "Is he coming?" Malik pointed at Elias. "No, he's staying here." Elias looked like he wanted to argue, but Jameer cut him off with a look. "You go out there and this whole thing blows up. Just stay inside. Don't answer the door. Don't turn on the TV. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Elias nodded slowly. "Okay." Jameer walked Malik down the 4 flights of stairs and out into the morning cold. The kid was quiet, which meant he was thinking, which was never good. "He's in trouble, isn't he?" Malik finally asked. "Yeah, little man. Big trouble. Are we going to help him?" Jameer looked down at his brother at those wide brown eyes that still believed the world could be good if you were good to it first. "I don't know if we can. But we're going to try, right?" Jameer wanted to say no, wanted to explain that helping Elias Montgomery could destroy everything they had, which wasn't much, but it was theirs. He wanted to be smart for once in his life. Instead, he heard himself say, "Yeah, we're gonna try." Malik smiled, and Jameer's heart broke a little more. He dropped Malik at the elementary school 2 blocks away, watched him disappear through the doors, then turned back toward the apartment. His phone buzzed. Another text from the landlord, this one all caps. "Power gets cut tonight if I don't get my money." Jameer shoved the phone in his pocket and kept walking. When he got back to the apartment, Elias was standing at the window again, but this time he wasn't just staring. He was watching something specific, his body tense. "What's wrong?" Jameer asked. "There's a car across the street," Elias said quietly. "Black sedan. It's been sitting there since you left." Jameer moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. Sure enough, a dark sedan was parked at the curb, engine running. Tinted windows, no one getting in or out. "Could be nothing," Jameer said, but his mouth had gone dry. "Could be." Elias's voice was flat, "but I don't think it is." As if on cue, the sedan's passenger door opened and a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than Jameer's yearly income. He looked up at the building, scanning the windows. "Get back," Jameer hissed, pulling Elias away from the glass. They pressed against the wall, breathing hard. Jameer's mind raced. How did they know? How could they possibly know unless they didn't? Unless they were just canvassing the area, checking every building near the station. But then he remembered the security cameras at Union Station, the ones that probably caught him helping Elias walk away last night. "We need to leave," Elias said. "Right now." "And go where?" "Anywhere but here." Jameer looked around the apartment at everything he and Malik owned. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. If he ran now, they couldn't come back. The landlord would lock them out, keep their stuff, and they'd be homeless. But if he stayed and those men came up here, it would be so much worse. "Okay," Jameer said, grabbing his Shoeshine kit and shoving some clothes into a backpack. "Okay, let's go." Elias was already at the door, hand on the knob. "Is there a back exit?" "Fire escape. Ends in the alley." "Good. Let's use that." They slipped out into the hallway, moving fast but quiet. Jameer led them to the window at the end of the hall, popped it open, and climbed out onto the rusted fire escape. Elias followed, moving carefully on the wet metal. They were halfway down when Jameer heard it. Footsteps in the stairwell, heavy and fast, coming up. "Move," he whispered urgently. They took the ladder down to the alley, and Jameer's hand slipped on the wet rungs. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his ankle, but he forced himself up. Elias landed beside him, and they ran. The alley spilled out onto 5th Street, and they merged into the morning foot traffic. Jameer kept his head down, pulling his hood up. Elias did the same with the collar of his suit jacket, which was a joke because nothing about him said, "blends in." "Where are we going?" Elias asked, breathing hard. "I don't know yet. Just keep moving." They walked for 10 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back twice to make sure no one was following. Jameer's ankle throbbed with every step, but adrenaline kept him upright. Finally, they ducked into a 24-hour laundromat, empty except for an old woman folding towels in the corner. Jameer collapsed into a plastic chair, and Elias sat beside him. "This is insane," Jameer muttered. "This is completely insane." "I'm sorry," Elias said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this." "Yeah, well," Jameer rubbed his face. "Too late now." Elias was silent for a moment, then said, "The man with the dragon ring. I keep seeing him. In the memory or whatever it is, he was angry, yelling at me about something. You think he has something to do with this?" "I don't know. Maybe." Elias touched his forehead, frustrated. "It's all fragments. Nothing connects." Jameer's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, expecting another threat from the landlord, but it was worse. A text from an unknown number. "We know you have him. Turn Montgomery over and you won't get hurt." Jameer's blood turned to ice. He showed the screen to Elias. Elias read it, his jaw tightening. "They're not trying to rescue me." "What? If they were police or my security team, they'd just come and get me. They wouldn't threaten you." Elias looked at Jameer, and there was something hard in his eyes now. Something that hadn't been there before. "Whoever's looking for me doesn't want to bring me home. They want me gone." "You mean dead?" "Yeah, I mean dead." Jameer stared at him. Why would someone want you dead? I don't know. But if I can't remember, I can't fight back." Elias stood pacing the small space between washers. "And that makes me a liability to whoever did this. So what do we do?" Elias stopped pacing. "We can't go to the police. If they're involved, we're finished. And we can't stay in one place. They'll find us." "Great plan." Jameer said sarcastically. Just keep running forever. You have a better idea. Jameer didn't. He leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes. 24 hours ago, his biggest problem was scraping together $38. Now he was on the run with a billionaire who couldn't remember his own life, being hunted by people who apparently wanted him dead. How does this even happen? He muttered. I don't know, Elias said, but I'm going to find out. They stayed in the laundromat for 2 hours, taking turns watching the street through the window. Jameer bought a coffee from the vending machine with the last of his cash, and they shared it. It tasted like burnt rubber, but it was hot. Around noon, Elias's stomach growled loud enough to echo off the walls. When's the last time you ate? Jameer asked. This morning. The egg. That was 6 hours ago. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're starving, and you got hit in the head hard enough to forget your own name. You need food. Elias looked like he wanted to argue, but his stomach betrayed him again. Okay, fine. Where? Jameer thought about his empty wallet and wanted to laugh. Or cry. Maybe both. I don't know, man. I'm broke. Like completely broke. Elias frowned. What about your Shoeshine money? Spent it on you. The food, the bandages, all of it. Elias went very still. You spent your last money on me. Yeah. The money you needed for your brother's inhaler. Jameer didn't answer. He didn't need to. Jameer. Elias's voice was rough. Why would you do that? Because you needed help more than I needed $12. But your brother. I'll figure it out. Jameer snapped, standing up. I always do. He walked to the window, staring out at the street. A police car rolled past, and his whole body tensed, but it kept going. False alarm. Behind him, Elias was quiet. When Jameer finally turned around, the older man was looking at him with an expression he couldn't name. What? Jameer asked. Nothing. Elias shook his head. Thank you. For everything. Jameer shrugged, uncomfortable. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. They left the laundromat when the old woman started giving them suspicious looks. Outside, the city had hit full swing, people rushing past on their lunch breaks. Jameer kept his hood up and his eyes down, hyper-aware of every glance in their direction. They walked east toward the warehouse district where the buildings were abandoned, and the cops didn't patrol as often. Jameer knew the area from his first year in New Crest when he and Malik had briefly lived in a shelter nearby. He hated it then, hated it more now, but it was safe. Or as safe as anywhere could be. They found an old textile factory with busted-out windows and a door hanging off its hinges. Inside, it smelled like mildew and rust, but it was dry and empty. Jameer led them to the second floor where they could see anyone approaching from the street. Elias sat against the wall, breathing hard. The walk had taken more out of him than he'd let on. You okay? Jameer asked. Just tired. And concussed. That too. Jameer sat beside him, and they stayed quiet for a while, listening to the city hum beyond the broken windows. A siren wailed somewhere far off. A dog barked, normal sounds from a world that felt very far away. Tell me about your brother, Elias said suddenly. Jameer glanced at him. Why? Because I want to know. Jameer hesitated, then sighed. His name's Malik. He's 9. Smart as hell, way smarter than me. He wants to be an engineer when he grows up. Builds things out of junk he finds on the street. Where are your parents? Dead. Car accident 3 years ago. I was 16. Malik was 6. We went into foster care, but they were going to split us up, so I ran. Took him with me. Elias was quiet for a long moment. You raised him. Alone. At 16. Didn't have a choice. You could have let them separate you. It would have been easier. Maybe. Jameer stared at his hands. But he's my brother. That's not negotiable. Elias nodded slowly, like something was settling into place in his mind. The inhaler. How bad is his asthma? Bad enough. He needs it every day, sometimes twice if the air's dirty. Without it, he can't breathe right. Gets scared. And you spent your last money on me instead of his medication. Jameer didn't answer. That was stupid, Elias said, but his voice was gentle. Brave, but stupid. Story of my life. They sat in silence again, and then Elias said something that made Jameer's chest tighten. I had a daughter. Jameer looked at him. I think so. In the dream last night, I kept seeing her. Blonde hair. Maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was calling for me. Elias's voice cracked, and I couldn't reach her. What happened to her? I don't know. But she's gone. I can feel it. He pressed a hand to his chest. Right here. Like something's missing. Jameer didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat with him, while the light shifted through the broken windows and the city kept moving like nothing was wrong. They stayed in the factory until evening, taking turns keeping watch. Around 6, Jameer's phone rang. Malik's school. His heart stopped. "Hello, Mr. Carter." The voice was clipped professional. "This is Principal Hendricks. Malik had an incident today during gym class. He couldn't breathe properly and we had to call an ambulance." The world tilted. "Is he okay?" "He's stable. They took him to Mercy General. But Mr. Carter, you need to get down here and fill out some paperwork. And we need to discuss the fact that Malik doesn't have his inhaler at school, which is a serious safety." Jameer hung up. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the phone. "What's wrong?" Elias asked, standing. "Malik, he's in the hospital. He couldn't breathe. We need to go." "No." Jameer grabbed his arm. "You can't. If those people are watching the hospital, you'll walk right into them." "I don't care." "Well, I do." Jameer's voice cracked. "You go there and they grab you and everything I did was for nothing." Elias stared at him, jaw tight. "So what's your plan? Leave me here while you go?" "Yeah, that's exactly the plan." "Jameer, I don't have time to argue." Jameer was already moving toward the stairs. "Stay here. Don't leave. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Wait." Elias grabbed his shoulder. "Take this." He pulled off his watch, a sleek silver thing that probably cost more than Jameer's entire life, and pressed it into his hand. "Pawn it. Get the money for your brother's inhaler, for the hospital bills." Jameer stared at the watch. "I can't take this." "You already did." Elias closed Jameer's fingers around it. "Please, let me do something to help." Jameer wanted to argue, but Malik's face flashed through his mind, scared and gasping for air, and the fight went out of him. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." He shoved the watch in his pocket and ran. Mercy General was chaos. Jameer pushed through the emergency room doors, scanning the crowd for Malik. A nurse tried to stop him, asking for insurance information, and he just kept walking. He'd deal with that later. Right now, he needed to see his brother. He found him in a curtained-off bay, hooked up to an oxygen machine. Malik's face lit up when he saw Jameer. "Hey, little man," Jameer said, kneeling beside the bed. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "You okay?" "I'm okay now, but it was scary." Malik's voice was small. "I couldn't breathe, Jameer. I tried, but I couldn't." I know, buddy." Jameer squeezed his hand. "But you're okay now. The doctor's got you." A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. "Are you the guardian?" "Yeah. We need to go over some paperwork and discuss payment options because your brother doesn't have insurance on file." "I'll figure it out," Jameer said flatly. The nurse gave him a look that said she'd heard that before, but she handed him the forms anyway. Jameer stared at the numbers at the bottom. Emergency room visit, oxygen therapy, ambulance transport, $4,200. He wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, he just signed where they told him to sign and handed it back. "Someone will be in to discharge him in about an hour," the nurse said. "Make sure he has his inhaler." "I will." The nurse left and Jameer sat on the edge of Malik's bed, pulling the watch from his pocket. He turned it over in his hands, looking at the inscription on the back. "To Elias, time means nothing. Without you, LL, a wife, a daughter, someone Elias couldn't remember." "Where'd you get that?" Malik asked. "A friend let me borrow it. It's really nice." "Yeah." Jameer stared at it. "Yeah, it is." He thought about walking out of this hospital, finding a pawn shop, trading this watch for maybe a tenth of what it was worth. Using that money to cover the bills, the inhaler, maybe a week of rent, if he was lucky. But that inscription, "Time means nothing without you." Someone loved Elias Montgomery enough to give him this. Someone who probably thought he was dead right now. Jameer slipped the watch back in his pocket. "I'll be right back," he told Malik. "Need to make a call." He stepped into the hallway and dialed the number for the factory. No, wait. Elias didn't have a phone. Damn it. He was about to head back to Malik when he saw them. 2 men in suits walking through the ER like they owned it. One of them was the same guy from outside the apartment building. The other was older, gray-haired, with a ring on his right hand that caught the fluorescent light. A dragon ring. Jameer's breath stopped. They were scanning faces, checking beds, looking for someone. Looking for Elias. But why here? Unless, oh no, unless they were looking for Jameer. And if they found him, they'd make him tell them where Elias was. Jameer backed up slowly, keeping his head down. He slipped into Malik's bay and closed the curtain. "We need to go," he whispered. "Right now." But the nurse said, "I don't care what she said." Jameer carefully pulled the oxygen tube from Malik's nose and helped him sit up. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Good. Stay close to me." He wrapped his jacket around Malik, hiding the hospital gown, and led him out the opposite side of the bay. They moved through the ER, weaving between gurneys and doctors, Jameer's heart hammering the whole time. They were almost to the exit when someone grabbed his arm. Jameer spun fist, already coming up, but it was just a security guard. "Hey, you can't take the patient without being discharged," the guard said. "He's my brother. I can do whatever I want." "Not how it works, kid. You need to—" Jameer didn't wait to hear the rest. He shoved past the guard, pulling Malik with him, and burst through the exit into the parking lot. Behind them, someone shouted. Footsteps pounded the pavement. Jameer ran. They didn't stop running until they were 6 blocks from the hospital, hidden in the doorway of a closed grocery store. Malik was wheezing again, and Jameer cursed himself for pulling the oxygen tube too soon. "Slow breaths," he coached, rubbing Malik's back. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You got this." Malik nodded, trying to control his breathing. It took 5 minutes before the wheezing eased. "Who were those people?" Malik finally asked. "Bad people. Why are they after us?" "They're not after us. They're after my friend. The one who gave you the watch." "Yeah." Malik looked up at him, and Jameer saw the fear there. The same fear he'd seen 3 years ago when their parents died and the world stopped making sense. "Are we gonna be okay?" Malik asked. Jameer wanted to lie, wanted to promise that everything would be fine, that they'd go home tomorrow, and life would go back to normal. Instead, he said, "I don't know, little man, but I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure we are." It wasn't much of a promise, but it was honest. They waited until dark, then made their way back to the factory. Jameer half expected Elias to be gone, taken, or killed while he was at the hospital, but when they climbed to the 2nd floor, he was still there, pacing by the window. He turned when he heard them, and relief flooded his face. "Thank God. I thought—" He stopped seeing Malik. "Is he okay?" "He's okay." Jameer guided Malik to sit against the wall. "But we've got a problem. Those people were at the hospital, looking for me. How did they know you'd be there?" "I don't know. Maybe they're tracking my phone." Jameer pulled it out and stared at it. "Or maybe they've got someone on the inside at the school who called them when Malik got sick." Elias took the phone from him and turned it off. "Either way, they're closer than we thought." "Yeah." Jameer sat down, hard exhaustion crashing over him. "We can't keep doing this, running, hiding. We need a real plan." "I know. So what is it?" Elias was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I need to remember everything. If I can figure out who's doing this and why, maybe we can stop it." "And how do you plan to remember?" "I don't know, but I have to try." Elias looked at Jameer, and there was determination in his eyes now. "And I need your help." "My help? I'm just a kid who shines shoes. You're the kid who saved my life. That makes you more than that." Jameer wanted to argue, but Malik cut in, his voice weak. "I'm hungry." Reality crashed back. They had no food, no money, no safe place to go, and Malik still didn't have his inhaler. "The watch," Elias said suddenly. "Did you pawn it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it's not mine to pawn." Jameer pulled it out and handed it back. "Someone gave you that. Someone who cares about you. I'm not taking it." Elias stared at the inscription, and something shifted in his face. "L," he whispered. "Laura, my wife. Her name was Laura. She died 2 years ago, car accident." The words came slowly, like he was pulling them from somewhere deep. "And Emma, our daughter. She died with her. They were in the car together when a drunk driver—" His voice broke. Jameer felt something crack in his chest. "I'm sorry. I remember now. I remember her face. Emma's laugh. The way Laura used to hum when she cooked." Elias pressed the watch to his forehead, tears streaming down his face. "I buried them on a Tuesday. It rained just like the night you found me." Malik crawled over and put a small hand on Elias's arm. "It's okay to be sad." Elias looked at the 9-year-old, and something in him broke completely. He pulled Malik into a hug, sobbing like he'd been holding it in for years. And maybe he had. Jameer turned away, giving them privacy, his own eyes burning. When Elias finally pulled back, he wiped his face with his sleeve. "I'm sorry." "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Jameer said quietly. "You lost your family. You're allowed to grieve." Elias nodded, composing himself. "After they died, I threw myself into work. 12, 14 hours a day. The company was the only thing I had left." He paused, and that's when the board started pushing back. They thought I was unstable, unfit to lead. My nephew Richard, he was the loudest voice against me. The guy with the dragon ring, how did you— I saw him at the hospital, searching for you. Elias's face went hard. He's trying to take over the company. If I'm dead or declared incompetent, he becomes CEO. So he pushed you down those stairs? I think so. I can't prove it, but yes. Then we go to the police. Tell them what happened. And say what? That I think my nephew tried to kill me, but I have no evidence because I can't remember anything. They'll think I'm insane. Richard will have me committed, and you'll be arrested for kidnapping. Jameer clenched his fists. So, we're just screwed. Not necessarily. Elias stood pacing again. I need to get to my lawyer, James Whitmore. He's been with me for 20 years. If anyone can help, it's him. Where is he? Downtown, Whitmore & Associates, 42nd floor of the Chandler Building. That's 15 miles from here. I know. And we have no car, no money, and people actively hunting us. I know. Great plan, Jameer muttered, but Malik spoke up, his voice small but steady. We can take the bus. Both men looked at him. The number 7 goes downtown, Malik continued. I take it sometimes when I visit the library. It's only $2. Jameer pulled out his pockets, empty. He looked at Elias. I don't have anything, Elias said helplessly. They sat in silence, the impossibility of their situation settling over them like a weight. Then Jameer had an idea. The watch, he said. We pawn it. Get enough for bus fare and some food. Then we go see your lawyer. No, Elias said immediately. That's the last thing I have of Laura. And it'll still be yours. We're just borrowing against it. Once this is over, you buy it back. Elias clutched the watch torn. Jameer could see the war in his eyes. Memory versus survival. Finally, Elias nodded. Okay, but the second this is done, I get it back. Deal. They found a pawn shop still open on 8th Street, a grimy little place with bars on the windows and a neon sign that flickered. The owner was a wiry man with suspicious eyes. What you got? He asked, not looking up from his phone. Elias set the watch on the counter. The man's eyes widened. He picked it up, turned it over, checked the inscription. This is real. Yes. Where'd you get it? It's mine. The man gave Elias a long look, taking in his rumpled suit, his bruised face. Sure it is. How much? Jameer cut in. For a pawn, 200. It's worth 10 times that. Then sell it for 10 times that. But you want cash now, it's 200. Jameer wanted to argue, but they didn't have time. Fine. The man counted out 220s and made Elias sign a form. 30 days to buy it back, or it goes to auction. They walked out, and Elias looked like he'd just sold a piece of his soul. We'll get it back, Jameer promised. Yeah, Elias said, but he didn't sound convinced. They bought bus tickets, a bag of chips, and 3 bottles of water from a bodega. Malik ate the chips like they were a 5-star meal, and Jameer felt that familiar ache of knowing he couldn't give his brother anything better. The number 7 bus came at 9:15 p.m., mostly empty. They sat in the back, Malik between them, and rode in silence as the city blurred past the windows. Jameer watched Elias stare at his bare wrist, rubbing the spot where the watch used to be. We'll fix this, Jameer said quietly. Elias looked at him. You keep saying that. Because I believe it. Why, you barely know me. Because you're a good person who got screwed over, and if I don't help you, who will? Elias shook his head slowly. You're a better man than I am. I doubt that. They got off downtown and the city changed. Glass towers, expensive cars, people in designer clothes. Jameer felt every eye on them, a poor black kid, a rumpled billionaire, and a 9-year-old in a hospital gown covered by a jacket. They didn't belong here. Everyone could see it. The Chandler Building was all chrome and marble, with a doorman who took one look at them and stepped forward. Can I help you? Translation, you don't belong here. We're here to see James Whitmore, Elias said. Do you have an appointment? No, but. Then you'll need to call his office during business hours. I'm Elias Montgomery. The doorman's expression didn't change. Sure you are. And I'm the Queen of England. Now move along before I call security. I'm serious. I'm Elias Montgomery, and I need to see my lawyer right now. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Call him, Elias said, desperation creeping into his voice. Just call James Whitmore and tell him Elias Montgomery is here. The doorman pulled out his phone, but Jameer could tell he was calling security, not the lawyer. This was falling apart. Then Malik spoke up. My brother's telling the truth. That's really Mr. Montgomery. I saw his picture on the news. The doorman glanced at Malik, then back at Elias, and something in his expression shifted. Doubt, maybe, or curiosity. He made a different call. "Yeah, this is Rick at the Chandler front desk. I've got a situation. Some guy claiming to be Elias Montgomery wants to see Whitmore." Pause. "Yeah, I know, but the kid says okay." "Yeah." He hung up. "Someone's coming down." They waited. 5 minutes that felt like an hour. Then the elevator opened, and a man in his 60s stepped out, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. He stopped when he saw Elias. His face went white. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Elias." Elias sagged with relief. "James." James Whitmore crossed the lobby in 3 strides and grabbed Elias by the shoulders. "Where have you been? Everyone thinks you're dead. The police, the board." He stopped, really looking at Elias. "What happened to you? It's a long story, and I need your help." James's eyes flicked to Jameer and Malik, questions forming, but he pushed them aside. "Come on, let's get you upstairs." They rode the elevator to the 42nd floor in silence. James's office was all dark wood and leather with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He closed the door and turned to Elias. "Talk." So Elias did. He told James everything. The fall, the memory loss, Jameer finding him, Richard with the dragon ring, the men hunting them, all of it. When he finished, James sat down heavily. "Richard, I should have seen this coming. You knew he was planning something." "I knew he was ambitious, but attempted murder." James shook his head. "That's another level." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but if what you're saying is true, we can build a case. Security footage, witness statements, financial records showing motive. How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months." "I don't have months, James. Richard thinks I'm gone. The second he finds out I'm alive, he'll come after me again, and this time he won't miss." James looked at Jameer and Malik. "Who are they?" "The kid who saved my life," Elias said simply. "And his brother. They're in danger too, aren't they?" "Yes." James pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "No." Elias grabbed his wrist. "If Richard has people inside the department, we're finished." "Then what do you want me to do?" "Protect them. Get them somewhere safe while we figure this out." James studied Jameer and Malik, then nodded. "I have a safe house in Connecticut. Old client's estate. It's off the grid." "Perfect." "But Elias, you can't just disappear again. The board needs to see you, or Richard will declare you incapacitated and take control." "I know." Elias stood, and despite the bruises and the exhaustion, there was steel in his voice now. "Set up an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow. I'll be there." "Are you insane?" Richard will have to explain why he thought I was dead when I'm standing right in front of him. James stared at him, then slowly smiled. "You want to corner him. I want to end this." James Whitmore made 3 calls, and within an hour, everything was moving. A car arrived to take Jameer and Malik to the safe house in Connecticut. A doctor showed up to check Elias's head wound and declare him fit for the fight ahead. And James drafted a statement to be released the moment Elias walked into that board meeting. But first, they had to get through the night. Jameer stood in James's office, watching the city lights below, and felt completely out of place. Malik was curled up on the leather couch, finally asleep, his breathing steady. Elias was in the next room on the phone, with someone James trusted making plans. "You did a good thing, kid." Jameer turned. James was standing behind him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I didn't do anything," Jameer said. "You saved a man's life." "That's not nothing." James handed him a cup. "Not many people would have done what you did." Jameer took the coffee, but didn't drink it. "I just didn't want him to die alone." "Most people would have called 911 and walked away." "Yeah, well, I'm not most people." James smiled. "Clearly." He paused, then said, "Elias wants to help you. When this is over, set you up, make sure you and your brother are taken care of." "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. It's gratitude." "Same thing." "It's not." James's voice was firm. "Charity is giving to someone because you pity them. Gratitude is giving to someone because they earned it. You earned this, kid." Jameer didn't know what to say to that, so he just sipped his coffee and stared out the window. Elias appeared in the doorway. "Car's here." Jameer looked at Malik, still sleeping. "I don't want to wake him." "Then don't." Elias walked over and carefully lifted Malik into his arms. The kid didn't even stir, just curled against Elias's chest, breathing softly. They rode the elevator down and got into the black SUV waiting at the curb. James stayed behind to finalize the board meeting, but he promised to call if anything changed. The drive to Connecticut took 2 hours. Jameer sat in the back watching the city give way to suburbs, then trees. Elias sat beside him, still holding Malik, and neither of them spoke. Finally, Jameer said, "You don't have to do this." "Do what?" "Help us. Once this is over, you can just walk away. Go back to your life." Elias looked down at Malik and his expression softened. "I don't think I can." "Why not?" "Because you remind me of what I lost, and what I should have been." He met Jameer's eyes. "You're 19 years old, raising a kid on your own, working yourself into the ground to keep him fed and safe. That's what a parent does. And I forgot how to do that when Emma died." "You didn't forget. You were grieving." "Maybe, but grief isn't an excuse to stop living." Elias brushed a hand over Malik's hair. "You showed me that." They arrived at the safe house just before midnight. It was a sprawling estate hidden behind iron gates and tall trees, the kind of place that screamed money in a quiet, tasteful way. Inside, there were 5 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and enough security to make Fort Knox jealous. Elias carried Malik upstairs and tucked him into one of the beds, pulling the blankets up to his chin. "He's a good kid," Elias said quietly. "Yeah," Jameer agreed. "He is." They stood there for a moment, watching Malik sleep, and then Elias said, "I'm going back to the city tomorrow for the board meeting." "I know. If something happens, nothing's gonna happen. But if it does," Elias turned to face him. "Take care of yourself, Jameer. You deserve more than what you've been given." "So do you." Elias smiled sadly. "Maybe." They went back downstairs, and Jameer made them sandwiches from the stocked fridge. They ate in silence, exhaustion finally catching up. Around 2 a.m., Ilyas fell asleep in one of the armchairs, and Jameer covered him with a blanket. Then he sat by the window, watching the dark woods beyond the glass, and waited for morning. The board meeting was set for 10 a.m. at Montgomery Holdings headquarters. Elias left at 7, dressed in a suit James had brought him, looking every bit the CEO he was supposed to be. Jameer wanted to go with him, but Elias refused. "You've done enough," Elias said. "Stay here. Keep Malik safe. I'll handle this." "What if Richard tries something? Then James will be there as a witness, and I'll have security on standby." Elias put a hand on Jameer's shoulder. "Trust me." Jameer didn't want to, but he nodded anyway. After Elias left, the house felt too big and too quiet. Malik woke up around 8, confused about where they were. "We're safe," Jameer told him. "Mr. Montgomery's friend is letting us stay here for a while." "Is he coming back?" "Yeah, little man, he's coming back." They spent the morning watching TV, eating cereal from the fancy kitchen, and trying not to think about what was happening downtown. At 10:03, Jameer's phone rang. It was James. "He's in," James said. "Elias just walked into the boardroom." Jameer's heart hammered. And you should see the look on Richard's face. Elias Montgomery stood at the head of the conference table facing 12 board members who looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good morning," he said calmly. "I apologize for my absence." Richard Montgomery was on his feet, face red. "This is impossible. You're supposed to be dead," Elias finished. "I know. Funny how that didn't work out. You've been missing for 3 days. Where the hell have you been?" "Recovering from an injury I sustained when someone pushed me down the stairs outside Union Station." The room went silent. "That's insane," Richard said, but his voice shook. "You're clearly not well, Elias. You need medical attention, not—" "I have medical attention, and I have witnesses, security footage, phone records showing you were at the station that night." Elias leaned forward. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Richard's mouth opened and closed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Elias's voice was ice. "You tried to kill me. And when that didn't work, you sent people to finish the job." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Elias pulled out his phone and played a video. Security footage from Union Station timestamped 2 nights ago. It showed Richard in the background watching as Elias walked toward the stairs, watching as someone in a dark jacket moved up behind him. The room exploded. Board members shouted questions. Richard tried to deny everything, but his face had gone pale. James stood in the corner recording every word. "Effective immediately," Elias said over the chaos. "Richard Montgomery is removed from this board and from any position within Montgomery Holdings. Legal action will follow." "You can't do this," Richard yelled. "I just did." Security escorted Richard out, still shouting threats. The other board members sat in stunned silence. Elias looked at each of them. "Anyone else want to try to kill me?" No one answered. Good. Meeting adjourned. By noon, the news was everywhere. Elias Montgomery alive. Nephew arrested for attempted murder. Jameer saw it on his phone and felt something unclench in his chest. It was over. 3 days later, a car pulled up to the safe house. Elias stepped out, looking tired but whole. Malik ran to him, and Elias caught him in a hug that lifted him off the ground. "You did it," Malik said. "We did it," Elias corrected, setting him down. He looked at Jameer. "Can we talk?" They walked out to the garden behind the house, leaving Malik inside. "I got the watch back," Elias said, showing it on his wrist. "Bought it back this morning." "Good. And I want you to have something." Elias pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Open it." Inside was a check. Jameer stared at the amount and felt dizzy. $50,000. "I can't take this," he said immediately. "It's not for you. It's for Malik. Medical expenses, school, whatever he needs. Consider it a trust fund." "Elias." "And there's more." Elias pulled out a second envelope. "A job offer. I want you to work for me." Jameer blinked. "Doing what?" "Whatever you want. I'll train you, send you to school, give you real opportunities. You saved my life, Jameer. Let me save yours." Jameer looked at the envelopes, then at Elias. "Why?" "Because you're a good person, and good people deserve good things." Elias smiled. "What do you say?" Jameer thought about Malik, about the hospital bills and the rent and the endless worry. He thought about shining shoes at Union Station, about cold nights and empty stomachs. Then he thought about Elias bleeding on the pavement and the choice he'd made to help. "Okay?" he said quietly. "Okay." Elias pulled him into a hug, and Jameer let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe things could actually get better. The first Monday morning at Montgomery Holdings felt like stepping into a different universe. Jameer stood in the lobby at 7:45 a.m. watching executives in $1,000 suits stride past him like they owned the world. Maybe they did. Glass elevators climbed the atrium, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, everything polished and perfect. And so far from Union Station, he might as well have teleported to another planet. His phone buzzed. A text from Elias, 17th floor. "Ask for Margaret." Jameer took a breath and headed for the elevators. The ride up was silent, except for the soft classical music and the occasional ding of floors passing. He caught his reflection in the mirrored walls. New shirt, courtesy of Elias. Decent pants, shoes that weren't falling apart. He looked almost like he belonged. Almost. The doors opened on 17, and he stepped into a sprawling office space. Cubicles stretched in neat rows, punctuated by glass-walled conference rooms. People typed, talked on phones, moved with the kind of purpose that came from knowing exactly what they were doing. Jameer had no idea what he was doing. "You must be Jameer," he turned. A woman in her 50s stood there, silver hair, pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a blazer that probably cost more than his rent. "I'm Margaret Chen, Director of Human Resources." She extended a hand. "Welcome to Montgomery Holdings." Her handshake was firm, professional. Jameer tried to match it. "Thanks. I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to." "Follow me. We'll get you set up." She led him through the maze of desks to a small office near the windows. It had a desk, a computer, a chair that actually had cushioning. Compared to his card table at home, it was paradise. "This is yours," Margaret said. "Mr. Montgomery wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." Jameer set his backpack down, feeling completely out of place. "I've never had an office before. First time for everything." Margaret handed him a folder. "Orientation materials, building access card, employee handbook, your schedule for the week." He flipped through it. Training sessions, department meetings, something called a stakeholder alignment workshop that he absolutely did not understand. "Is this too much?" Margaret asked, watching his face. "No, I mean yes, but I'll figure it out." She smiled, and it softened her whole face. "You will. And if you need help, ask. That's not weakness here. That's how we learn." She left him to get settled, and Jameer sat in his new chair, staring at his new computer, feeling the weight of this new life pressing down on him. His phone buzzed again. Malik sending a photo from his new school. The kid grinning in front of a robotics lab, giving a thumbs up. Jameer smiled. This was why he was doing this. Not for himself, for Malik. He could handle anything for Malik. The first week was brutal. Every meeting felt like they were speaking a different language. Market penetration, vertical integration, synergistic partnerships. Jameer nodded along, took notes, and Googled half the words later in the bathroom. But he wasn't stupid. He learned fast. By week 2, he started connecting the dots. Montgomery Holdings wasn't just one company, it was a dozen smaller companies working together. Real estate, media, healthcare. Each division operated independently but fed into the larger whole. And the community development department where Jameer worked was the bridge between the company's profits and its public image. "We fund programs that help people," his supervisor Patricia explained during their first one-on-one. She was a black woman in her 40s, sharp and no nonsense, and Jameer liked her immediately. Youth centers, job training, affordable housing initiatives, makes the company look good, helps communities, everybody wins. "Sounds cynical," Jameer said. "It is cynical, but it's also effective." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Here's what you need to understand. These programs do real good. They change lives. But they also exist because it's profitable to care. That's capitalism. And you're okay with that. I'm pragmatic about it. Would I rather live in a world where companies help people out of pure altruism? Sure. But we don't live in that world. So I take what I can get and try to maximize the good along the way." Jameer thought about that. What if we could do more? Like what? Like actually invest in communities instead of just funding programs that look good on paper, like hiring from those communities, training people who need it most. Patricia studied him. "You've been here 2 weeks, and you're already trying to change the system. Is that bad?" "No." She smiled. "It's exactly what Elias said you'd do." Over the next month, Jameer settled into a rhythm. Classes Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings at the community college Elias had enrolled him in. Work Monday through Friday 9 to 5, learning the mechanisms of corporate charity. Evenings with Malik helping with homework, cooking dinner, trying to be the parent their mom and dad would have been. It was exhausting. Some nights, Jameer fell asleep at his desk, textbooks still open. But it was working. His first real project came 6 weeks in. Patricia assigned him to evaluate a youth mentorship program the company funded on the South Side. "Just observe," she said. "Take notes. See if it's actually helping or just burning money." Jameer knew the neighborhood. He'd lived 3 blocks from the community center when he was 16. Walking in felt like time travel. The building was the same cracked paint, flickering lights, the smell of old gym mats. But the kids were different. Younger versions of himself trying to survive in a city that didn't care if they made it or not. He watched the mentors work with them. Homework help, resume building, college prep. Good stuff, but surface level. Nobody was addressing the real problems. The food insecurity, the housing instability, the fact that half these kids were one emergency away from homelessness. Jameer took notes, pages of them. When he submitted his report to Patricia, he didn't hold back. "The program works, but it's not enough. These kids need more than resume tips. They need consistent meals, safe housing, medical care. We should expand funding to cover basic needs, not just job training." Patricia read his report in silence, and Jameer's stomach twisted. Maybe he'd overstepped. Maybe this was too much too soon. Finally, she looked up. "You want to present this to Elias?" "What?" "Your recommendations. Present them to Mr. Montgomery. He's the one with final approval on budget expansions." "I can't do that. I'm 19. I've been here 6 weeks. And you know more about what these communities need than anyone else in this building." Patricia slid the report back across the desk. "Prepare a presentation. You've got a meeting with him Friday." Jameer's hands went numb. "Friday. This Friday." "Yep. That's in 3 days." "Then you better get started." He spent those 3 days in a panic, building a presentation that didn't sound completely amateur. Charts showing program effectiveness, statistics on food insecurity, testimonials from kids he'd interviewed at the center. Malik helped because of course he did. The 9-year-old had a better eye for design than Jameer ever would. "This slide's too wordy," Malik said, pointing at the screen. "Make it simpler. I need all this information." "No, you need them to remember the important parts. Too many words, and they'll stop paying attention." Jameer stared at his little brother. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just noticed." Friday came too fast. Jameer walked into the executive conference room on the 41st floor and immediately wanted to run. Elias sat at the head of the table, flanked by Patricia and 3 other department heads Jameer had never met. "Jameer," Elias said, smiling. "Have a seat." Jameer opened his laptop and tried to remember how to breathe. "Whenever you're ready," Elias said. He clicked to the first slide. 6 weeks ago, you sent me to evaluate the Southside Mentorship Initiative. I spent the past month observing interviewing participants and analyzing outcomes. His voice shook, but he pushed through. The program works. Graduation rates are up. Job placements are improving. But we're only scratching the surface of what these kids actually need. He walked them through the data. 70% of participants lived in food-insecure households. 40% had unstable housing. 85% lacked consistent access to health care. We're teaching them how to write resumes, Jameer said, but we're not addressing why they can't focus in class, why they're too hungry to study, why they miss sessions because they're taking care of sick family members. He pulled up his final slide. A proposal to triple the program's budget and expand services to include meal programs, emergency housing assistance, and a healthcare partnership with local clinics. It's expensive, he admitted, but if we actually want to change lives instead of just checking a box for corporate social responsibility, this is how we do it. The room was silent. Jameer's heart hammered. He'd blown it, gone too far. They were going to thank him politely and ignore everything he said. Then Elias stood up. How much do you need? Jameer blinked. What? To implement this. All of it. How much? Jameer fumbled with his notes. $2.3 million annually for the first 3 years. Done. One of the other executives cleared her throat. Sir, that's a significant investment without guaranteed ROI. I don't care about ROI on this. Elias cut her off. I care about impact. Jameer's right. We've been doing the minimum because it looks good. Time to actually make a difference. He turned to Jameer. Draft a full implementation plan. You've got 2 weeks. Then we launch. Jameer couldn't speak. He just nodded. After the meeting, Elias walked him to the elevator. That was good work, Elias said. I thought you were going to say no. Why would I say no? Everything you proposed makes sense. Because it's expensive and risky. And I'm just some kid who... Stop. Elias put a hand on his shoulder. You're not just some kid. You're someone who understands what these communities need because you lived it. That perspective is invaluable. The elevator arrived and they stepped in. I've been thinking, Elias said as the doors closed, about expanding your role. I've been here 2 months, and you've already proven you can do this work. I want you leading community initiatives full-time. Report directly to me. Jameer's head spun. That's a director-level position. I know. I'm 19. I know that too. People are going to think it's charity, that you're only promoting me because I helped you. Elias looked at him, and his expression was serious. Let them think what they want. I'm promoting you because you're good at this, because you care, because you see problems everyone else ignores. He paused. And because I trust you. The elevator reached the 17th floor, and the doors opened. Think about it, Elias said. Let me know Monday. Jameer stepped out, and the doors closed behind him. He stood there for a long moment staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and called Malik. Guess what? He said when his brother answered. What? I think we're going to be okay. That weekend, Jameer took Malik to the cemetery. They stood in front of their parents' graves, fresh flowers in hand. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years of struggling and surviving and barely holding on. Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. Jameer knelt, placing the flowers on the headstone. Sorry, it's been a while. Things have been crazy. Malik sat beside him. Quiet. I got a job, Jameer continued. A real one. With benefits and everything. And Malik's in a good school now. He's building robots. You'd love that, Dad. He wiped his eyes. I know I messed up a lot. Made bad calls. Put us in danger more than once. But we made it. We're still here. Malik leaned against him, and Jameer put an arm around his brother. I'm going to keep taking care of him, Jameer promised. The way you would have. I swear. They sat there until the sun started setting, and then they walked home. Monday morning, Jameer walked into Elias's office. I'll take the position, he said, but I have conditions. Elias raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I want to hire from the communities we serve, people who've been through the system, who understand what it's like. Agreed. And I want transparency. No more programs that look good on paper but don't actually help. Everything we do has to have measurable impact. Done. Anything else? Jameer hesitated, then said, I want you to be honest with me. If I screw up, tell me. Don't treat me like a charity case. Elias stood and extended his hand. You have my word. They shook on it. Welcome to Leadership Director Carter. 1 year. 1 year since Jameer found a bleeding stranger on a rainy street and made the choice that changed everything. Now he stood backstage at the Montgomery Holdings annual gala, watching 1,000 people fill the grand ballroom of the Westmont Hotel. Chandeliers dripped crystal light. A string quartet played something elegant and expensive. Waiters glided through the crowd with champagne that probably cost more per glass than Jameer used to make in a week. He still wasn't used to this world. "You look like you're about to throw up," Malik said beside him. Jameer glanced at his little brother, now 10 years old, wearing a suit that actually fit. "I feel like I'm about to throw up." "Don't. You'll ruin your fancy shirt." "Thanks for the encouragement." Malik grinned, adjusting his tie. He'd grown 3 inches in the past year, shot up like a weed. Still too skinny, but healthy, strong. The wheezing was gone. The fear in his eyes when he couldn't breathe gone too. "You're gonna be great," Malik said, suddenly serious. "You always are." Before Jameer could respond, Patricia appeared, clipboard in hand. 5 minutes. You ready?" "No." "Perfect. That means you care." She squeezed his shoulder. "Go show them what you've got." The gala had been Elias's idea, a celebration of Montgomery Holdings' community initiatives over the past year, combined with the launch of a new foundation. Jameer had helped plan every detail, but he'd assumed he'd be watching from the audience. Then 2 weeks ago, Elias told him he'd be speaking. "About what?" Jameer had asked. "About the work you've done, the programs you've built, the lives you've changed." "I can't do that." "Yes, you can. There'll be 1,000 people there. Important people. And you'll tell them the truth. That's all they need to hear." Now standing in the wings, Jameer watched the crowd settle into their seats. He recognized faces from TV, politicians, CEOs, people who moved the world with a phone call. What was he doing here? The lights dimmed. Elias walked onto the stage, and the applause was immediate. He looked good, better than he had a year ago. The grief lines around his eyes had softened. He smiled more easily now. "Good evening," Elias said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Thank you all for being here. A year ago, I stood in a very different place, literally and figuratively." The room quieted. "I was lost, broken. I'd spent 2 years drowning in grief, burying myself in work, convinced that if I just pushed hard enough, the pain would go away." He paused. "It doesn't work that way." Jameer watched from the wings, heart in his throat. "And then something happened that changed everything. I was attacked, left for dead on a street corner in the worst part of the city, and a 19-year-old kid who had every reason to keep walking stopped." Elias turned toward the wings, toward Jameer. "Jameer Carter didn't know who I was. Didn't know I had money or power or anything that could help him. He just saw someone who needed help. And despite being broke, despite struggling to feed his own brother, despite having 1,000 reasons to walk away, he didn't." The audience was completely silent. "He took me home, spent his last dollars on me, protected me when people tried to kill me. And when this was all over, when I offered him money, you know what he said." Elias smiled. "He said no. Because he didn't help me for a reward. He helped me because it was the right thing to do." Jameer felt his throat tighten. That kind of character is rare. That kind of integrity is priceless. And that's why over the past year, I've watched him transform every program he touches. He doesn't see numbers on a spreadsheet. He sees people, real people with real needs. Elias gestured to a screen behind him, and it lit up with images. The Southside Mentorship Initiative expanded into a full community center, kids eating hot meals, families getting medical care, young adults in job training programs. In 12 months, Jameer has overseen the expansion of 7 community programs across this city. He's brought in partnerships with local hospitals, schools, and businesses. He's hired from the communities we serve, giving opportunities to people who've never had them. More images flashed, success stories, graduation photos, families in new homes. And he's done it all while finishing his degree, raising his brother, and still finding time to volunteer at the same community center where he used to shine shoes. The audience applauded, and Jameer wanted to disappear. But tonight isn't just about celebrating what he's done. It's about what comes next. Elias's voice grew stronger. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to announce the formation of the Carter Montgomery Foundation." The screen changed. A logo, a mission statement, numbers that made Jameer's head spin. "This foundation will focus on supporting young people aging out of foster care, providing housing, education, and career support. It will operate independently from Montgomery Holdings with its own board and full autonomy. and it will be led by our new Director of Community Development, Jameer Carter. The applause was deafening. Jameer stood frozen backstage, unable to process what he'd just heard. But that's not all, Elias continued. We're also launching the Emma and Laura Memorial Scholarship Fund, named after my daughter and my wife. This fund will provide full college scholarships to students from underserved communities who demonstrate the same character and resilience that Jameer has shown. The audience stood applauding, and Elias turned toward the wings. Jameer, come up here. Patricia pushed him gently forward, and Jameer's legs carried him onto the stage before his brain could catch up. The lights were blinding, the applause overwhelming. Elias met him at center stage and pulled him into a hug. You saved me when I was nothing, Elias said quietly so only Jameer could hear. Let me save you now that I remember who I am. They separated, and Elias handed him the microphone. Jameer stared out at 1,000 expectant faces. His hands shook. His mouth went dry. Then he saw Malik in the front row, grinning so wide his face might split. Jameer took a breath. A year ago, he started, and his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. A year ago, I was working at Union Station, trying to scrape together enough money to buy my brother's inhaler. I was tired, broke, scared that tomorrow would be worse than today. He looked down at the microphone, and then I saw someone who needed help. That's it. That's the whole story. I didn't know who he was. Didn't care. He was hurt, and I couldn't just leave him there. Jameer met Elias's eyes. I didn't help Mr. Montgomery because I knew who he was. I helped him because I knew who I was, someone who couldn't walk past another person in pain. The room was completely silent. We live in a world that tells us to look out for ourselves, to protect what little we have, and ignore everyone else. And I get it, I do. When you're barely surviving, helping someone else feels impossible. He thought about those nights in the tiny apartment splitting a single egg between 3 people. But here's what I learned. We don't survive alone. We survive together. Every meal someone shared with me when I was hungry. Every time a neighbor watched Malik so I could work. Every person who saw us struggling and decided to care. That's how we made it. Jameer's voice grew stronger. So if there's anything I want you to take from this, it's simple. Help people. Not because of what they can give you. Not because it makes you look good, but because we're all human and we're all struggling, and sometimes the difference between someone making it or not is whether you decide to stop and care. He paused. You never know whose life you might save, or how they might save yours in return. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. People stood. The sound was overwhelming. Jameer handed the microphone back to Elias, his whole body shaking. Thank you, Elias said, pulling him into another hug. For everything. Thank you, Jameer whispered back. After the speeches, after the dinner and the dancing and the endless parade of people wanting to shake Jameer's hand, he finally escaped to the balcony. The night air was cool, the city stretched out below in a carpet of lights. Jameer leaned against the railing and let himself breathe for the first time in hours. There you are. He turned. Malik had followed him out, tie-loosened jacket draped over his arm. Too much? Malik asked. Way too much. You did good, though. Like, really good. Jameer smiled. Thanks, little man. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. Do you ever think about them? Malik asked quietly. Mom and Dad. Every day. You think they'd be proud? Jameer looked at his brother, this kid who'd survived foster care and poverty and more fear than any 9-year-old should know, who still smiled, still believed the world could be good. Yeah, Jameer said, his voice thick. I think they'd be really proud. Of both of us. Of both of us. Malik leaned against him, and Jameer put an arm around his shoulders. We made it, Malik said. Yeah, we did. The door opened, and Elias stepped out, holding 3 glasses of sparkling cider. Thought you might want these. He handed them each a glass, then raised his own. A toast, Elias said, to second chances, to finding family in unexpected places. And to the kid who taught me that being rich means nothing if you're poor in spirit. They clinked glasses and Jameer took a sip. It was sweet and cold and perfect. What happens now? Malik asked. Elias and Jameer exchanged glances. Now, Elias said, we get to work, building something that matters, something that lasts. Can I help? Malik asked. Absolutely. We need good engineers to help design better community centers. Malik's eyes lit up. Really? Really? They stayed on the balcony until the party wound down, talking about plans and possibilities and all the ways they could make things better. Finally, Elias checked his watch. I should get back inside. Board members to schmooze. He turned to Jameer. Take Monday off. You've earned it. I can't just... Director's orders. Elias smiled. Spend the day with your brother. I'll see you Tuesday. He headed back inside, leaving Jameer and Malik alone under the stars. You know what's weird? Malik said. What? A year ago we had nothing, and now we have everything. Jameer thought about that. We didn't have nothing. We had each other. Yeah, but now we have each other and a nice apartment and food, and you have a real job and I'm in a good school and... Okay. Jameer laughed. Point taken. They gathered their things and headed for the exit. The valet brought around the car Elias had insisted Jameer take nothing fancy, just a reliable sedan that didn't break down every week. As they drove home through the city, Malik fell asleep in the passenger seat, head against the window. Jameer drove carefully, taking the long way so he could pass by Union Station. The building was quiet this late, just a few stragglers waiting for the last trains. The spot where he used to set up his Shoeshine box was empty now. Someone else had probably taken it, someone else trying to scrape together enough to survive. Jameer thought about stopping, about finding whoever had his old spot and giving them something to help. But Malik was asleep, and it was late, and tomorrow was soon enough. There would always be tomorrow now. He drove on through the streets that used to terrify him, past the neighborhoods that used to be all he knew. And then he drove home to the apartment with heat that worked, and a fridge full of food, and a bed for Malik that didn't sag in the middle. He carried his brother upstairs, tucked him in, and stood in the doorway, watching him sleep. We made it, he whispered. We actually made it. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from Elias. Thank you for tonight, for this year, for everything. You changed my life, Jameer. I hope I've changed yours too. Jameer typed back, You did. More than you know. He set the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had tried to break him and failed. Somewhere out there, someone was struggling tonight. Someone was scared and alone and convinced tomorrow would be worse. And maybe if Jameer had built the programs right, they'd find help. Maybe they'd find hope. Maybe they'd find what he found, that sometimes when you help someone expecting nothing in return, you get everything that matters. He closed the curtains and went to bed, and for the first time in years, he slept without worry, because tomorrow would come and it would be good.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.